I reached for the mailbox, a familiar unhurried motion I'd repeated every morning for the 17 years since I'd settled in this quiet corner of Maple Creek, Ohio. My fingers, stiff with arthritis, fumbled with the small key. Inside, among the usual bills and advertisements, was a cream-colored envelope that immediately stood out. The envelope was thick, the paper embossed and clearly expensive. I turned it over in my hands, admiring the elegant calligraphy of my name. There was no return address, but the postmark showed it came from the affluent suburbs on the other side of Maple Creek, a neighborhood where the wealthy resided. Back inside, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table and began preparing my morning coffee. In my 77 years, I'd cultivated a strict routine. Rise at 6, check the mail at 7, then breakfast and coffee while reading the morning paper. Order provided structure to a life that, without it, felt profoundly empty. As the coffee dripped slowly into the pot, filling the kitchen with its familiar, comforting aroma, I picked up the envelope again. I opened it carefully with a letter opener, another ingrained habit from my days as an engineer. Inside was a single, gold-embossed card. Olivia Martin and James Prescott invite you to share in the joy of their marriage. I read the words, but their meaning didn't immediately register. Olivia, my daughter, Olivia. She was getting married, and she had sent me an invitation. I sank slowly into my chair, the card trembling in my hand. The last time I'd seen Olivia was 32 years ago, when she was just 10. She had been standing at the window, watching me leave with a suitcase after another bitter fight with her mother, Catherine. I'd waved, but Olivia had turned away. Since that day, I'd only seen her in photographs. Of course, I had tried to stay in touch. In the first few years after the divorce, I sent child support checks, birthday and Christmas presents, and wrote letters. I showed up on my scheduled visitation days, but Catherine always found a reason to cancel. Olivia's sick. Olivia has a big test. Olivia doesn't want to see you. Eventually, I stopped coming, though I continued to write and send gifts, until one day, a whole batch of my letters was returned, stamped, moved, no forwarding address. I learned that Catherine and her daughter had moved to another city, but I never stopped trying to find them. When I managed to locate their new address a few years later, I started writing again. This time, no letters were returned, but no replies ever came. I held on to the hope that Olivia was at least reading them. When she turned 18, I sent a special letter containing my phone number and address. I asked to see her, telling her I wanted to explain everything, to make sure she knew that I loved her and always had. There was no response, but I didn't give up. I sent greetings every Christmas and birthday, occasionally receiving a formal, generic card in return, likely at Catherine's insistence, worried her daughter might forget her father entirely. Years passed. I learned that Olivia had gone to college and then to law school. I was proud of her, even if I felt I had no right to that pride. When she graduated, I sent her a large check, but it came back, torn into tiny pieces. After that, I stopped trying. The pain of rejection had become too much to bear. I threw myself into my work and dated a few women, but none of the relationships lasted. They all sensed there was an unhealed wound in my life. In time, I came to accept my loneliness as a permanent state. Upon retiring, I moved to Maple Creek, choosing it because I knew Olivia lived nearby. I had no intention of imposing on her. I just wanted to be close, in case she ever changed her mind. Sometimes I would drive downtown, hoping for a chance encounter on the street, but the years went by and it never happened. And now this, a wedding invitation. The coffee in the pot boiled over, filling the kitchen with a burnt smell. I rushed to turn off the stove, but didn't bother making a new pot. My appetite had vanished. I reread the invitation, this time focusing on the details. The wedding was in 3 weeks at the Oak Ridge Country Club, an exclusive venue. Clearly, the groom came from a wealthy family. At the bottom of the card, a small note was written in neat script. "I hope you can make it, Mr. Hollister. Catherine said I should invite you." Not Dad, not even Father, just Mr. Hollister. And that phrase, "Catherine said I should invite you." It wasn't from the heart. It was an obligation. I set the card aside and walked to the window. Outside was my well-tended but modest garden, my pride and solace in recent years. The spring flowers were just beginning to bloom, and the air was sweet with the scent of lilacs. My gaze fell on the rose bush by the fence, the same variety little Olivia had loved so much. I had planted those roses at every house I'd lived in since the divorce, an irrational but persistent attempt to maintain a connection to my daughter. In the early years after the separation, when I still saw her occasionally, I would cut the prettiest buds for her. She would put them in a glass of water to take home. I wondered if she remembered. I returned to the table and picked up the invitation again. To go or not to go. Logic told me my presence was not truly wanted. The formal invitation had been sent out of a sense of duty, perhaps even due to the pressure of appearances. What would it look like, not inviting your own father to the wedding? But my heart ached to see my daughter on the most important day of her life. I pulled a photo album from a desk drawer. It held every picture of Olivia I'd managed to collect over the years. The first few were from the happy period of our marriage. Olivia as a newborn in the hospital, her first steps, her first birthday, a picnic in the park. Then came the rare school photos Catherine had reluctantly sent in the first few years after the divorce. After that, there were only newspaper clippings. Olivia winning a prize at a school science fair, Olivia in her senior portrait, Olivia graduating top of her class in law school. The last few years had added photos from social media that I'd found through mutual acquaintances. I studied the pictures, trying to find the little girl I once rocked in my arms within the features of this grown woman. She looked so much like her mother, the same high cheekbones, the same proud set of her shoulders, but her eyes were mine, gray-blue, with a distinctive crease in the eyelids. The indecision tormented me all day. That evening, sitting in my worn armchair with a glass of whiskey, I made my choice. I would go. No matter what happened, no matter how coldly I was received, I had to see my daughter. If not for her sake, then for my own, so I wouldn't spend the rest of my life regretting a missed opportunity. The next morning, I called my old friend Walter, the only person who knew the full story of my family drama. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Walter asked after I told him the news. "Remember what happened at your mother-in-law's funeral? Catherine nearly called the cops," I remembered. 8 years ago, I had tried to attend the funeral of Catherine's mother, a woman who had always been kind to me. Catherine had caused a scene, accusing me of only showing up to see Olivia. It was partly true, but I had genuinely wanted to pay my respects. I never got to speak to my daughter that day. "This time will be different," I replied, with a confidence I didn't feel. She invited me herself. "At Catherine's insistence," Walter reminded me. "Are you sure Olivia even knows about the invitation?" I hesitated. It was entirely possible that Catherine had sent it without asking her, or that Olivia had signed it without a second glance among hundreds of others. But the handwriting on the note. It seemed personal, even if it was restrained. "I have to try, Walt," I said finally. "This might be my last chance." "Then I'm going with you," Walter said firmly. "I don't want you there alone if things go south." I was grateful for my friend's loyalty, but I refused. This was something I had to do on my own. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. I bought a new suit, dark blue, conservative but elegant. I ordered an expensive watch as a gift for the groom and a diamond brooch for Olivia. I knew she might reject my gifts, but I wanted them to be worthy of the occasion. I also started writing a speech, just in case I was given a chance to say a few words. I rewrote it countless times, struggling to find the right words to express my love and regret, without blaming Catherine or making Olivia feel guilty for our years of estrangement. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, imagining different scenarios. In the most optimistic one, she would run into my arms, tears in her eyes, confessing she had always dreamed of our reconciliation. In the most pessimistic, security would escort me out after a scandal orchestrated by Catherine. The reality, I suspected, would lie somewhere in between, a cold greeting, a formal exchange of pleasantries, perhaps an awkward father-daughter dance if tradition demanded it. But even that would be more than I'd had in 30 years. On my way from the bedroom to the kitchen, I paused at the hallway mirror. A tall, lean old man with a straight back and proud posture stared back at me. His hair, once thick and brown, had thinned to a respectable gray, but I still styled it with care. The lines on my face were deeper, but my blue eyes remained clear. I adjusted my collar and continued to the kitchen. At breakfast, I looked over the invitation one last time. The wedding was 2 weeks and 3 days away. I'd marked the date on my calendar in red, though I knew it by heart. May 21st, a Saturday, at 4 in the afternoon. The ceremony was in the garden of the Oak Ridge Country Club, followed by a reception in the main hall. For the first time in years, I felt a knot of nervousness in my stomach. Some sixth sense told me this wedding would change my life. For better or for worse, I didn't know, but it would change. After breakfast, I went out into the garden. The morning was fresh, a light breeze rustling the leaves of the apple trees. I walked over to the rose bush and crouched down to examine it. The first buds were beginning to form. By the wedding, they would likely be in full bloom. I decided I would cut the most beautiful one for my boutonniere. That evening, my younger sister Helen called. "Arthur, I heard the news. You were invited to Olivia's wedding?" I didn't ask how she knew. Helen always had her sources. "Yes, I got the invitation yesterday," I replied. "And you're going, after everything?" I sighed. Helen had never approved of my attempts to reconnect with my daughter. "She's not worthy of you," she often said. "That girl let her mother turn her against her own father." I never argued, but I didn't agree either. Olivia was a child when Catherine and I divorced. Children almost always side with the parent they live with. "Yes, Helen, even after everything. You know it could be a trap, right? Catherine always had a flair for the dramatic. I don't think Catherine would use her own daughter's wedding for revenge. You were always too trusting, big brother." Helen's voice was a mixture of exasperation and affection. "Do you want me to come with you? Catherine will think twice before starting something with me there." I smiled. Helen and Catherine had never gotten along. They were two strong-willed women, too similar in their stubbornness. "Thank you, Helen, but I have to do this alone." "Suit yourself. But if anything goes wrong, you call me immediately. I'll come and get you." We talked for a while longer about her children, my nephews, who were now parents themselves. Helen was 8 years younger than me, and her family life had been much more successful than mine. A husband, 3 children, 6 grandchildren. Sometimes I envied her, but mostly I was just happy for her. After the call, I sat in the living room for a long time, looking at the family photos on the walls. Most were old, my parents, my sister, and me as children, Helen with her husband and kids. Only in one small corner were the few pictures of Olivia I possessed. Well, maybe soon there would be another one. Olivia in her wedding dress. Before bed, I pulled out the invitation again. My eyes fell on the groom's name, James Prescott. I knew nothing about the man. What was he like? Was he worthy of my daughter? Did he love her the way she deserved to be loved? I hoped their marriage would be happier than mine had been. The next day, I drove downtown to Thompson Coors Jewelers. I knew the owner, old Mr. Thompson, from when I'd designed an extension for his store years ago. He was old now, but still served his regular customers personally. "Arthur, what a pleasant surprise. What brings you in?" I explained the situation. Mr. Thompson listened with a sympathetic ear. He knew my family's history. "I want something special for my daughter. Something she could wear on her wedding day, but not too ostentatious." "I understand," Mr. Thompson nodded. "I think I have just the thing." He brought out a brooch from the display case, a delicate flower of diamonds and pearls. "White symbolizes purity, perfect for a wedding." It's elegant, but not flashy. She could pin it to her dress or her bouquet. The brooch was beautiful, but I felt it was missing something. I asked if a small ruby could be added to the center of the flower. "Of course," Mr. Thompson said, "but why a ruby, specifically?" "It's Olivia's birthstone," I lied, "and it will remind her of the roses she loved as a child." Mr. Thompson smiled knowingly. "I'll have it ready by the end of the week." "And a gift for the groom?" I chose a classic watch and had the back engraved, "To James from Olivia's father. Cherish her time." It was a little ambiguous, but my intentions were good. When I got home, I decided to find out what I could about James Prescott. The invitation offered no details about his profession. I called my former colleague, Frank, whose son worked at the same law firm as Olivia. Prescott? Yeah, I know the name, Frank said after a brief chat with his son. He's a partner at Grant Miller Dunn, specializes in corporate law. Seems to be very successful. James has met him a few times at firm events. Says he comes across as intelligent and ambitious. About 40, maybe a little older. I thanked Frank. So, James was about 10 years older than Olivia and worked at a rival firm. Interesting. As the wedding day drew closer, my anxiety grew. I reread my speech dozens of times, even though I knew I would probably never get the chance to deliver it. I rehearsed different ways the meeting with Olivia and Catherine might go. Several times I almost called my daughter to ask if she truly wanted me there. But each time something stopped me, the fear, perhaps, of hearing her say no. Instead, I wrote a letter. Just one more in a long line of messages that Olivia had likely never read. But this time, I decided, I would hand it to her in person on her wedding day. She could decide for herself whether to read it. A week before the wedding, I pulled a box of old photo albums from the closet. It was a box I hadn't touched in 15 years. Wiping the dust from the cardboard lid, I felt my heart clench with a familiar ache. These pictures were evidence of another life. A life in the past. A life where I was a husband and a father. Not a lonely old man. I settled into my armchair and opened the first album. Catherine and I, married in August of 1970. Catherine in a simple white dress, me in a sharp suit. We were smiling, holding hands, so young. I was 22, she was 20. I remembered that day in perfect detail. The smell of flowers in the small church, the light rain that fell after the ceremony, which everyone took as a good omen. Catherine's nervous smile as she said her vows. She was beautiful dark hair, high cheekbones, luminous eyes. I couldn't believe my luck. We'd met at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. I'd ended up there with a broken leg after a fall at a construction site, a young engineer just starting my career. I was miserable at the prospect of spending weeks in a cast. Catherine was my nurse. She would walk into my room with a smile that lit up the space. From day one, she called me her brave patient. By the time I was discharged, I was hopelessly in love. Our courtship was a whirlwind. 3 months later, I proposed. 3 months after that, we were married. Catherine's parents were thrilled. They saw me as a reliable, promising husband for their daughter. My mother, however, thought we were rushing things. You barely know the girl, Arthur, she'd warned. But I was certain I had met the love of my life. The first 2 years were blissful. We rented a small apartment in the suburbs and spent weekends at the lake or in the mountains. Catherine continued working at the hospital while I built my career at an engineering firm. We dreamed of a house and children, but decided to wait until we were more financially stable. I turned the page. Here we were, Catherine and I, on the porch of our first home, a small but cozy house with a green lawn. We bought it when we found out Catherine was pregnant. It happened a little sooner than planned, but we were overjoyed. Catherine was radiant. Her rounding belly seemed like a miracle. I couldn't wait for the baby to arrive, already picturing myself as a father. Olivia was born on a July morning, just as the sun was beginning to rise. The labor was long and difficult 16 hours. Catherine was in agony. I was by her side the whole time, holding her hand, feeling utterly helpless. When the baby's first cry finally echoed through the room, we both wept with relief and joy. Our daughter was a tiny thing with a red face and a fuzz of blonde hair. She looks like you, Catherine said, though I couldn't see the resemblance. To me, Olivia was simply a miracle, a perfect, tiny person who had suddenly become the center of my universe. The first few months after Olivia's birth were hard. Catherine suffered from what we would now call postpartum depression. She cried often, complained of exhaustion, and would sometimes sit for hours, staring out the window while Olivia wailed in her crib. I tried to help as much as I could, but I spent most of the day at work. We hired a nanny, an elderly woman named Martha, who was a true lifesaver. Gradually, Catherine recovered. By Olivia's first birthday, she was back to her old self-energetic and cheerful. She threw a huge party, inviting all our friends and relatives. The photo from that day shows Olivia sitting in her high chair, covered in cake, with Catherine and me standing on either side, beaming with pride. The next 3 years were probably the happiest of my life. Olivia grew into a curious, joyful child. She started talking early, knew the names of all the flowers in our garden, and loved when I pushed her on the swing I'd built in the backyard. Catherine wanted to go back to work, but decided to wait until Olivia started kindergarten. Instead, she got involved in community activities, joining the PTA and organizing charity events. And then, something changed. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when the rift began. Maybe it was when Catherine started talking more and more about feeling trapped in the house, or when I started staying later at work after a promotion increased my responsibilities, or when our conversations dwindled to nothing but household logistics. I flipped through a few more pages. Here was Olivia on her way to first grade, a little girl with 2 pigtails and a backpack that looked bigger than she was. I remember walking her to the school gates, how she hugged me goodbye, and bravely marched toward her new life. Catherine wasn't in the picture. She had gone back to work at the hospital and was on duty that morning. As Catherine threw herself back into her career, our relationship became even more strained. She came home tired and irritable, often snapping over small things. I didn't understand what was wrong. She had wanted to go back to work, but now she accused me of not helping enough with the house and with Olivia, even though I was doing everything I could. We started to argue, infrequently at first, then with increasing regularity. Olivia, of course, sensed the change in our home. She became quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes I'd find her sitting at the top of the stairs, listening to us argue below. A pang of guilt would hit me every time, but I didn't know how to fix things. Catherine wanted a second child. I was against it, not because I didn't want more children, but because I felt our marriage was already cracking, and another baby would only add to the strain. It became another source of conflict. By Olivia's 6th birthday, Catherine and I were essentially roommates. We slept in separate bedrooms, spoke only when necessary, and tried to avoid each other. I spent more time with our daughter, picking her up from school, helping with her homework, and reading her bedtime stories. Catherine, meanwhile, took on more and more extra shifts at the hospital. It was during this period that I first noticed Catherine turning Olivia against me. It was nothing overt, just subtle remarks, sighs, and implications. Daddy's late again. Daddy doesn't have time for us. Daddy's too busy with his work. I tried to talk to her about it, but she denied everything, calling me paranoid. And then I found out about her affair with a doctor from her hospital. I saw them together by chance at a coffee shop. I was supposed to be on a business trip, but had come home early. They were holding hands, gazing into each other's eyes. I didn't make a scene. I just left before they saw me. That evening, I confronted Catherine. She didn't deny it. "What did you expect?" she asked coldly. "You haven't been my husband for a long time, Arthur. You're just a roommate who sometimes plays with my daughter." Her words cut me to the core. My daughter, not our daughter. As if I had no claim to fatherhood. Divorce was inevitable, we both knew it. Catherine wanted me to move out immediately, but I refused. "I'm not leaving, Olivia," I told her. We spent 2 miserable weeks under the same roof, barely speaking. Olivia walked around as if in a daze, surely sensing the tension. Finally, we met with lawyers. Catherine wanted the house, sole custody of Olivia, and substantial alimony. I was willing to give her the house and agreed to generous payments, but I insisted on joint custody. We fought for months before reaching a compromise. Catherine would get the house, and I would have the right to see Olivia on weekends and for part of her school holidays. I agreed to pay more than the standard amount of child support to ensure Olivia would want for nothing. The day I moved out was one of the worst of my life. Olivia stood at the window, watching me load my things into the car. I waved to her, but she turned away. Catherine stood beside her, a hand on her shoulder, a look of triumph on her face. I rented an apartment nearby to be close to my daughter. The first weekend after the divorce, I arrived to pick up Olivia as agreed. Catherine told me she was sick and couldn't go. The same thing happened the next week. The third time, I insisted on seeing her, threatening to go to court for violating the custody agreement. Catherine reluctantly let me see Olivia, but only at their house and under her supervision. Olivia was cold and distant. She gave one-word answers, avoided my gaze, and refused to sit near me. I could feel Catherine's influence. What had she been telling our daughter in my absence? Still, I kept coming, bringing gifts, telling her about my new apartment, and inviting her to visit. About 6 months after the divorce, Catherine announced that she was marrying the doctor and they were moving to another city, 300 miles away. I was devastated. How would I see my daughter? Catherine indifferently said I could visit once a month if I wanted. I consulted a lawyer, but he said there was little chance of stopping the move. The courts usually sided with the mother, especially if she had remarried and could provide a stable family environment. Before they left, I met with Olivia alone. I insisted on it despite Catherine's resistance. We sat in a park, eating ice cream. Olivia was almost 8. She looked sad, but was no longer as aloof as she had been. "Are you going to come visit me?" she asked. "Of course, sweetheart, as often as I can. And you can come visit me during your holidays." "Mommy says you won't want to, that you'll have a new family." I was stunned. "I don't have a new family, Olivia. And even if I did someday, you will always be my daughter, my little princess." She smiled for the first time in a long time and snuggled up against me. "I'll miss you, Daddy." That afternoon, I cut a rose for her from a public flower bed. It was strictly forbidden, but I couldn't resist her admiring gaze. The rose was a pale pink, almost white, with a delicate fragrance. "It's as beautiful as you are," I said, handing it to her. Olivia took it gently, careful of the thorns. After they moved, I faithfully made the trip to see them once a month. The first few visits went well. Catherine let me spend the whole day with Olivia, sometimes without her supervision. But gradually the visits grew shorter. Catherine found more and more reasons why Olivia couldn't spend much time with me. Music lessons, friends' birthday parties. I noticed Olivia becoming distant again. She talked less, smiled less, and started refusing my gifts. One day I overheard Catherine telling her before I arrived, "Remember what I told you? He left us when you were little. Don't get too attached. He might just disappear again." I was furious. For the first time, I yelled at Catherine, accusing her of lying and manipulating our child. She replied coldly, "Isn't it the truth? You're gone. You live somewhere else. You see your daughter once a month if you show up at all. What kind of father's that?" After that fight, my visits became an ordeal. Catherine never left us alone, constantly interrupting our conversations and commenting on my every word. Olivia grew more and more withdrawn, sometimes refusing to leave her room when I came. When she turned 10, Catherine announced they were moving again, this time to another state, 1,000 miles away. Her new husband had accepted a position at a prestigious hospital. I went to a lawyer again, but the outcome was the same. Nothing could be done. I came to say goodbye. Olivia was standing at the window as I pulled up. I waved, but she turned away just as she had the day I left our old house. When I went inside, she had already locked herself in her room and refused to come out. Catherine said with false sympathy, "She's upset about the move. You'd better just leave her be." I left with a heavy heart, leaving behind a letter and a gift for Olivia, a gold chain with a rose-shaped pendant. I don't know if she ever received it. After they moved, I continued to send letters, cards, and gifts. At first, I tried to arrange visits, but Catherine always found a reason to refuse. Olivia is busy with school. Olivia has important classes. Olivia doesn't want to see you. When I insisted on my rights as a father, she told me bluntly, "You can sue if you want, but Olivia is old enough now for her opinion to be considered. And she says she doesn't want to see you. Do you really want to force her?" I couldn't force my own daughter. Not if she truly didn't want to see me. And why wouldn't she, after everything Catherine must have told her? So I stopped trying to visit. Instead, I kept writing, hoping that one day Olivia would want to know the truth. When she turned 18, I sent a special letter, detailing the story of my divorce from Catherine, explaining why I had left and how I had tried to stay in touch. I didn't blame Catherine directly. I just laid out the facts as I knew them. I included my phone number, my address, and an open invitation to visit any time. There was no response. I continued to follow my daughter's life from afar. I found out she went to college, then law school. I sent anonymous checks for her tuition through a lawyer, knowing Catherine would return them if she knew they were from me. When Olivia graduated, I sent a large check directly to her with a graduation card. It came back, torn into tiny pieces. That was the moment I almost gave up. Almost, but not quite. I continued to send Christmas and birthday cards, though I no longer expected a reply. And now, after all these years, a wedding invitation. A final chance, perhaps, to reconnect with my daughter. I closed the album, a mixture of pain and hope churning inside me. The memories hadn't changed, but maybe Olivia had. Maybe she was finally ready to hear my side of the story. I greeted the day of my daughter's wedding with the first rays of sunlight. I woke an hour before my alarm, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with visions of the meeting to come. I had dreamed of Olivia, not the grown woman getting married today, but a little girl with pigtails running toward me with her arms outstretched. I woke with tears on my cheeks. I went through my morning rituals with meticulous care, as if preparing for the most important interview of my life. I shaved slowly, making sure to trim every gray bristle, and carefully styled my hair. My new suit hung waiting on the rack, dark blue, conservative, elegant. I put it on, adjusted my tie, and pinned the boutonniere, a single white rose from my garden, to my lapel. I had wrapped the gifts the day before, the watch for James and the brooch for Olivia, each in a silver box tied with a white ribbon. Beside them was an envelope with a check my wedding gift, a sum I'd been saving for years for a day I wasn't sure would ever come. Before I left, I reviewed my speech one last time. I didn't expect to deliver it, but I wanted to be ready, just in case fate decided to smile on me. I left the house at noon sharp. The ceremony wasn't for another 4 hours, but the drive to the Oak Ridge Country Club was over an hour, and I wanted to arrive early to gather my thoughts and perhaps see Olivia before the formalities began. The day was sunny and warm, perfect for a wedding. I turned on the radio but didn't hear the music. My thoughts were consumed by the impending reunion. How would Olivia react? What would Catherine say? Would the groom see me as the bride's father or as a suspicious intruder? I arrived at Oak Ridge shortly after 1. The country club was impressive, with manicured grounds, century-old oak trees, and a graceful Georgian-style main building. A guard at the gate checked my invitation against a list and directed me where to park. As I got out of my car, I saw that guests were already beginning to gather. They stood in small groups on the lawn, laughing and talking. No one paid any attention to me, which I was grateful for. I needed a moment to acclimate. I walked toward the main building where a sign indicated the reception would be held. The ceremony itself was planned for the garden in a gazebo beautifully decorated with flowers. I could see rows of white chairs, an archway of roses, and musicians tuning their instruments. Everything was elegant and tasteful. Inside the main building's lobby, organizers bustled about, giving last-minute instructions to the staff. I approached a young woman with a clipboard, introduced myself, and asked where I might find the bride. "Miss Martin is getting ready in the West Wing, sir," she replied, "but I'm not sure if now is a good time to visit. Perhaps you'd like to wait in the parlor. The ceremony begins in 2 hours." I thanked her, but decided to try my luck anyway. Following the signs, I made my way down a long hallway to the West Wing. The door to the bridal suite was ajar. I could hear women's voices, laughter, and the rustle of fabric. My heart began to pound. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. The voices inside fell silent. A moment later, the door opened wider, and a young woman in a lavender dress, clearly a bridesmaid, looked at me with polite confusion. "Yes?" "I'd like to see Olivia," I said. "I'm her father." The girl's eyes widened. She glanced back into the room, unsure what to do. From within, a voice I recognized instantly, despite not having heard it for 32 years, called out, "Who is it, Melissa?" "It's some man. He says that." Before she could finish, Catherine appeared in the doorway. She hadn't changed much. The same dark hair, now with expertly concealed gray streaks. The same high cheekbones, though her skin was less firm. Her eyes cold and wary, fixed on me with poorly disguised annoyance. "Arthur," she said without a hint of a smile, "you're early." "Hello, Catherine. I'd like to see Olivia. She's busy. Dress, makeup, hair. You know how it is. A woman needs time to prepare for the most important day of her life. I noted how she emphasized the word woman, as if to remind me that my little girl had grown up long ago without my help. I won't be long. I just wanted to congratulate her in person and give her a gift. Catherine's eyes flickered to the boxes in my hands, and her lips tightened. Gifts are to be left at the reception. You should wait in the hall or in the garden. Olivia will be out when she's ready. She began to close the door, but another voice called from the back of the room. Who is it, Mom? My heart skipped a beat. It was Olivia, my daughter, my child. Catherine hesitated for a fraction of a second, then sighed. Your father is here. There was a pause, then Olivia said, Let him in. Catherine reluctantly stepped aside, allowing me to enter. I took a step forward and finally saw her. Olivia, already in her wedding dress, was sitting before a large mirror while a stylist put the finishing touches on her hair. Our eyes met in the reflection, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. She was beautiful, with the same dark beauty as Catherine, but with my eyes. Her expression held neither warmth nor hostility, only a guarded curiosity. Hello, Olivia, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You look beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Pink. Hollister, she replied formally. Thank you for coming. Mr. Hollister, not Dad, not Father. I felt a familiar pang of pain, but pushed it down. I wouldn't miss my daughter's wedding for the world, I said, taking another step forward. I brought a gift for you and one for your fiancé. I held out the boxes. Olivia nodded to the stylist, who stepped back, allowing her to rise. She moved toward me, graceful and elegant, her posture proud. She took the gifts from my hands, her fingers carefully avoiding mine. Thank you. I'll give James his gift. I was hoping to meet him in person. Of course, during the reception. The conversation was stilted and awkward. I could feel the wary glances of the bridesmaids and the openly hostile stare of Catherine. Olivia seemed unsure of what to say next, and I had already exhausted my prepared lines. Well, I said finally, I won't keep you from your preparations. I'll see you at the ceremony. Olivia nodded with visible relief. I turned toward the door, but at the last moment I had to say it. Olivia, I'm truly glad you invited me. It means a lot. She frowned slightly. Yes, of course. Mom said it was the right thing to do. So it had been Catherine's idea after all. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment, and walked out of the room. I spent the next hour and a half wandering the club grounds. More guests arrived, elegant men in suits and women in fashionable dresses. I felt lonely and out of place, an intruder at someone else's celebration. At 3:30, the guests were invited to take their seats in the garden. I found my assigned spot in the last row, far from the center aisle. An older man who introduced himself as James's uncle sat next to me. We exchanged a few polite words. When I mentioned I was the bride's father, he raised his eyebrows in surprise, but said nothing. At exactly 4 o'clock, the music began. The groom, a tall, handsome man who looked to be a little older than Olivia, walked down the aisle. The bridesmaids followed, and then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Olivia appeared, walking on the arm of a middle-aged man I didn't recognize, her stepfather, I presumed. She was breathtaking in her white dress with its long train, and there, pinned to her shoulder, was the brooch I had given her, the small flower with a ruby at its center. The sight of it touched me to my core. The ceremony was beautiful. I watched my daughter say her vows, exchange rings with the man she loved, and glow with happiness when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. I cried unashamedly. Tears of pride, of joy for her, and of bitterness that I was merely a distant spectator at this momentous event in her life. After the ceremony, we all moved to the main hall for the reception. I found my seat at a table in the back, with some of the groom's distant relatives and a few of Catherine's elderly friends. No one knew who I was, and I was in no hurry to enlighten them. The traditional wedding rituals began. The newlyweds' first dance, toasts from the best man and maid of honor, the cutting of the cake. I watched it all with a bittersweet feeling. Olivia looked happy, and that was all that mattered. After the main events, the dancing began. I noticed Catherine casting wary glances in my direction, as if afraid I might cause a scene. I decided to approach the newlyweds to congratulate them properly. They were surrounded by guests, graciously accepting well wishes. I waited patiently for my turn. Finally, I stepped forward. Congratulations, I said, addressing them both. I wish you many years of happiness. James smiled and extended his hand. Thank you. Are you a friend of the family? Before I could answer, Olivia said, a clear note of embarrassment in her voice. This is my father. James looked surprised but recovered quickly. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. Olivia hasn't told me much about you. I'm sure she hasn't, I replied with a faint smile. We haven't been close in recent years, but I hope that can change now. Olivia tensed slightly. James, noticing her discomfort, tactfully changed the subject. Thank you for the gift, sir. The watch is absolutely stunning. I'm glad you like it. And, Olivia, I see you're wearing the brooch. She touched the pin on her shoulder. Yes. It went well with the dress. Thank you. An awkward silence fell. I was about to ask if I might have the traditional father-daughter dance, but I never got the chance. Catherine swept in, beaming. Darlings, the photographer is waiting for the family portraits, she announced, completely ignoring me. The groom's parents are ready. We'll be right there, Mom, Olivia replied, then turned to me. Excuse us, Mr. Hollister. We have to go. Mr. Hollister, again. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Of course, I wouldn't want to delay you. They walked away and I returned to my table. My neighbor, James's uncle, looked at me curiously. So, you're the bride's father? I'm surprised you weren't included in the family photos. I shrugged, not wanting to explain, but his words stung. Why hadn't I been included? Was I not family, however estranged? The evening wore on. I danced with a few single women my age, widows and divorcees, who had been brought along by friends or relatives. They were pleasant and chatty, but I was distracted, my eyes constantly following Olivia. Around 8 o'clock, the MC announced an open microphone for toasts. One by one, friends and relatives came up to share funny stories and wish the couple well. I hesitated. Should I go up? I had my speech, but I doubted it would be welcome. Finally, I made up my mind. As the previous speaker finished, I stood and walked toward the microphone. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Catherine tense and lean over to whisper something to Olivia. I took the microphone and faced the crowd. Good evening. My name is Arthur Hollister, and I am... Excuse me. Olivia stood up abruptly, her voice ringing out in the suddenly quiet hall. I think there's been a misunderstanding. This man is not part of our family. He is a stranger here, and I don't understand why he feels the need to speak. A dead silence fell over the room. All eyes were on me. I stood frozen, microphone in hand, unable to process what had just happened. My own daughter had publicly disowned me. Catherine looked triumphant. James looked mortified. The guests exchanged awkward glances. I could have just apologized and walked away. I could have silently put down the microphone and vanished from Olivia's life forever, as she so clearly wanted. But something inside me, pride, a sense of justice, or maybe just the accumulated pain of 32 years, wouldn't let me. You're right, Olivia, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I am a stranger in your life, but not by my own choice. I paused, looking directly at her, and I think it's time for the bride to know the truth that has been kept from her for far too long. The hall was utterly still. I saw Catherine start to rise from her seat, but she froze as I continued. My voice was firm, though my insides were trembling. 32 years ago, I divorced Olivia's mother. I have seen my daughter only a handful of times since then, the last time when she was 10 years old. Not because I didn't want to be part of her life, but because I was not allowed to be. I saw Olivia frown, her gaze shifting from me to her mother. James placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. I'm not going to ruin your wedding with family drama, I continued, my eyes locked on Olivia. And I don't want you to have to choose between me and your mother, but for once in your life, I want you to know the truth. Catherine was now at the edge of the stage, her face a mask of fury. Arthur, stop this at once, she hissed, but I shook my head. I had been silent for too long. After the divorce, I was granted the right to see you on weekends and holidays. For the first few months, your mother found excuses to cancel our meetings. Then you moved to another city. I drove to visit you once a month, but gradually your mother cut our time together shorter and shorter until it stopped completely. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to speak calmly, factually, without accusation. When you were 10, you moved to another state. I tried to stay in touch letters, gifts, phone calls, but your mother decided you were better off without me. Olivia's gaze shifted back to Catherine, who now stood stone-faced, her arms crossed. I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped loving you. Every birthday, every Christmas, I sent cards and gifts. I followed your accomplishments through mutual friends. I was so proud when you went to law school, when you became a successful lawyer. I pulled a worn envelope from my jacket pocket. In this envelope are copies of the child support checks I paid until you came of age. Here are copies of letters I wrote that were returned unopened. Here are receipts for gifts I sent and newspaper clippings about your achievements that I have treasured for years. I placed the envelope on a nearby table. Olivia didn't move, but I saw her expression change from disbelief to confusion. I'm not saying I was a perfect father or a perfect husband. My marriage to your mother didn't fail because of her alone. We both made mistakes, but I never ever gave up on you. I never stopped trying to be a part of your life. Now, I addressed Catherine directly. I don't blame you, Catherine. You did what you thought was best for Olivia. You were a good mother to her. But you deprived your daughter of her father, and you deprived me of my daughter. Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Her eyes held a mixture of anger and, I thought, a flicker of shame. I turned back to Olivia. Do you know why your mother and I divorced? Olivia shook her head slightly, her eyes fixed on me as if seeing me for the first time. Your mother told you that I left, that I abandoned our family. The truth is, she met another man, your future stepfather. I discovered their affair by accident. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She said she didn't love me anymore and wanted a new life. I could have fought for our marriage, but I didn't want to hold on to a woman who no longer loved me. So I agreed to a divorce. Catherine went pale. It was a truth she had clearly never shared with her daughter. A new expression dawned in Olivia's eyes, shock. I'm not telling you this to hurt your mother or to make you choose. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know the truth. You are a grown woman now. You can decide for yourself what to believe. The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the waiters stood frozen against the walls. I never started a new family after the divorce, despite what your mother might have told you. I've lived alone all these years. I've always kept a room in my house ready for you, just in case you ever decided to visit. And in my garden, I grow the same roses you loved so much as a child. I saw Olivia's hand drift unconsciously toward the brooch on her shoulder, the ruby rose. I'm not asking you to forgive me for not being there as you grew up. I'm not asking you to accept me into your life now if you don't want to. I just wanted you to know that your father never stopped loving you and always wanted to be a part of your life. I paused, seeing tears well up in Olivia's eyes. I longed to go to her, to hug her as I had when she was a little girl. But I knew I had no right. Now you have a husband, a new family, a new life. I wish you all the happiness in the world, Olivia. I truly do. And if you ever want to know more about your father, about your own story, I'll be waiting. I placed the microphone back on its stand and walked off the stage. No one spoke. No one moved to stop me. I headed for the exit, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on my back. Just as I reached the door, I heard quick footsteps and Olivia's voice. Wait! I turned. She stood a few feet away, her wedding dress shimmering, tears glistening on her cheeks. Is it true? She asked quietly. Everything you said? Every word, I answered. I can prove it if you like. I've kept all the returned letters, all the receipts, all the court documents from my attempts to see you. She stared at me, searching my face. Mom always said you left us. That she wanted nothing to do with me. I know. And I'm sorry you had to grow up believing that. I didn't add. That's exactly what she wanted you to believe. I wouldn't turn my daughter against her mother. Not even now. Olivia hesitated, a clear battle raging within her. Then she took a step toward me. Why say all this today? At my wedding? I sighed. I didn't plan to. I came here simply as a guest, hoping to be a small part of your happy day. But when you publicly disowned me, I knew it might be my last chance to tell you the truth. I've been silent for too long. James approached, looking anxiously at his new wife. Is everything all right, honey? Olivia nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. I think we need to talk, but not now, not today. This is my wedding day, and I want it to be happy. Of course, I agreed. I never meant to spoil your celebration. I apologize if I have. Don't apologize, she said quickly. If what you said is true, then I'm the one who should be apologizing for how I treated you. I shook my head. You didn't know. You believed what you were told your whole life. It's not your fault. Catherine was now making her way toward us from across the hall, her face a mask of anger and anxiety. Olivia saw her and said quickly to me, I'll call you after the honeymoon. We'll talk. I'll be waiting, I replied, a warmth of hope spreading through my chest. Olivia turned to her approaching mother. Mom, not now. We'll talk later. Right now I want to get back to my guests. Catherine stopped, clearly taken aback by her daughter's firm tone. She shot me a venomous look but said nothing. James offered his wife his arm, and they walked back into the hall. I heard the MC announce, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the traditional father-daughter dance. I expected Olivia to dance with her stepfather, as had surely been planned, but she turned and looked at me across the room. Our eyes met, and in hers, I saw a question. I remained where I was, unsure how to respond. Olivia said something to her stepfather, who looked surprised but nodded. Then, she started walking toward me. The crowd parted as she approached. Are you going to dance? And she asked, stopping in front of me. With you? I asked for the first time that day, using the familiar form of address. Olivia smiled a small, tentative smile, the first one she had given me in 32 years. I'm not saying I believe you completely or that I forgive everything, but I want to know the truth, the whole truth. That's all I ask, I said, offering her my hand. We walked to the center of the floor. A slow song began to play, the very song I had dreamed of dancing to with my daughter at her wedding. The guests formed a circle around us, some whispering, others smiling. I gently placed a hand on her waist and took her other hand in mine. We began to move to the music, awkwardly at first, then with more confidence. Do you really have pictures of me as a child? She asked suddenly. Every single one, I replied. And your school photos, and the newspaper clippings about your awards and your graduation pictures. I followed your life from afar, the best I could. She was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you try to contact me when I was an adult, when I wasn't under Mom's control anymore? I did. When you turned 18, I sent you a special letter with my phone number and address, inviting you to visit. I wrote several more times after that. When you graduated from law school, I sent you a large check. Her eyes widened. That check. It came back, torn into pieces. Yes. After that, I thought you truly wanted nothing to do with me, that maybe your mother had been right to keep me away. Olivia shook her head. I never tore up any check. I never even knew about it. Mom said it was just a blank card from a distant relative. A surge of anger rose in me, but I suppressed it. This wasn't the time for accusations. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that we are dancing on your wedding day, and that maybe we have a chance to get to know each other again. Olivia nodded, but I could see she needed time to process everything she had heard. She had lived her whole life with one version of the story. Now she was being presented with a completely different one. She would have to decide for herself what to believe, how to feel about her mother, about me, and about her own past. The music ended. We stood for a moment, still holding hands. The guests applauded politely but with a certain restraint, as if they knew they were witnessing something deeply personal. Thank you for the dance, Olivia said, stepping back, and for the truth, whatever it may be. Thank you for listening, I replied. It's more than I ever dared to hope for. She nodded and turned back to her husband, who was watching us with a kind expression. I saw Catherine pull her aside, speaking urgently. Olivia listened, but her gaze kept drifting back to me. I knew I had done all I could. I had spoken the truth I had held inside for so long. I had opened my daughter's eyes to our family's history, at least, my version of it. Now it was up to her. I walked back to my table to get my jacket. The evening was winding down, and many guests were beginning to leave. I didn't want to cause any more awkwardness for Olivia. It was better to leave now, on the positive note of our dance and conversation. As I was putting on my jacket, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see James. "Mr. Hollister," he said seriously. "I don't know what happened between you and Olivia's family in the past, but I can see how important it is for her to understand it. I want you to know that I will not stand in the way of you two communicating. If Olivia wants to get to know you better, I will support her." I was touched by his words. "Thank you, James. That means a great deal to me. You seem like a good man. I'm glad my daughter found you," he smiled. "She's a wonderful woman. Smart, strong, kind. You should be proud of her." "I am," I replied. "Every single day." We shook hands, a firm, man-to-man grip. I felt I might have found an ally in him. "Take care of her," I said. "I promise," he replied gravely. I walked out of the hall without looking back. The night air was cool and crisp under a sky full of bright stars. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of silence lift from my shoulders. Whatever happened next, I had finally told my truth. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. As I got into my car, I glanced one last time at the brightly lit country club. Somewhere inside, my daughter was dancing, laughing, and probably thinking about the words I had said. I started the engine and drove slowly out of the parking lot. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, that uncertainty didn't frighten me. It was filled with hope. I arrived home around midnight, emotionally exhausted, but feeling a sense of profound accomplishment. The house greeted me with its usual silence. I turned on the hall light, hung up my jacket, and went to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat down at the table, allowing myself for the first time all day to fully process what had happened. I had told the truth. For the first time in 32 years, I had spoken openly about the things that had been bottled up inside me for decades. I pictured Olivia's face, her confusion, the foundation of her world crumbling. I didn't know if I had done the right thing, choosing her wedding day for such a revelation. Perhaps I should have waited for a more suitable moment. But I had waited so long, I was afraid another chance might never come. The phone rang the next morning as I was having breakfast on the veranda. The number was unfamiliar. "Arthur Hollister," I answered. "Mr. Hollister, this is James Prescott." The voice was calm and confident. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, not at all," I said, surprised. "What can I do for you?" "Olivia and I are leaving for our honeymoon in a few hours, but she would like to meet with you before we go, if you're free, of course." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, of course. When and where?" "Riverview Park in an hour. There's a cafe by the pond." "I'll be there," I said, already rising from my chair. "Good. And Mr. Hollister?" "Olivia's very shaken up. We talked all night. Please be patient with her." I promised I would and hung up. I quickly changed out of my pajamas and into casual clothes slacks, a shirt, a light sweater. I wanted to look approachable, not create any more tension. Riverview Park was a 20-minute drive away. I arrived early and chose a table on the cafe's outdoor patio, overlooking the pond. The morning was bright and clear. Ducks glided across the water, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers and freshly baked pastries. Right on time, I saw Olivia enter the park. She was alone. She wore a simple summer dress and sunglasses, her hair pulled back in a casual knot. She looked younger than she had at the wedding and more vulnerable. She saw me, hesitated for a moment, then walked purposefully to my table. "Good morning," she said, sitting down across from me. "Good morning, Olivia. Thank you for coming, especially today." She nodded, taking off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. She clearly hadn't slept much. "I thought we should talk, after last night." A waitress came to take our order. Olivia asked only for coffee. I did the same. When the waitress left, an awkward silence settled between us. "I spoke with my mother last night after you left," Olivia said finally. "She's very upset." "I can imagine," I replied neutrally. "She says you twisted the facts, that it wasn't how you portrayed it." I nodded. "I expected that. We all remember the past differently, through the lens of our own pain. She denies preventing our meetings. She says you were the one who lost interest, that your visits became less frequent, because you chose your career over your family." I sighed. "And what do you remember, Olivia? You were young, but not so young that you have no memories of your own." She hesitated. "I remember you visiting." first often, then less so. I remember waiting for you and you not showing up. Did your mother ever tell you why I didn't show up? That I was busy? That I had more important things to do? She nodded. I came every single time we had an arrangement, I said softly. But your mother would often cancel at the last minute. Olivia's sick. Olivia has a big test. Olivia doesn't want to see you. I was never too busy for you, Olivia. Never. The waitress brought our coffee. Olivia wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I don't know what to believe, she admitted quietly. My whole life, I thought you abandoned us. And now? You're telling me something completely different. I understand your confusion. I'm not asking you to believe me overnight, just to give yourself a chance to learn the truth. Olivia took a sip of coffee. Why were you silent for so long? Why didn't you try to find me when I was an adult? I did, I replied. When you turned 18, I sent you a special letter. I wrote again after that, many times, but I never heard back. I assumed you truly didn't want to see me, that perhaps your mother had been right to shield you from me. I never received any letters, Olivia said, not a single one. That's what I suspected. She shook her head. It seems so unbelievable. That Mom would hide your letters, that she would keep us apart. Why would she do that? I chose my words carefully. Your mother was very hurt after our divorce. I think she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, that it would be better for you to forget me and accept your stepfather as your new father. But why invite you to the wedding then? I shrugged. Guilt, maybe, or pressure from others. Or maybe she was so convinced of our estrangement that she thought my presence wouldn't make a difference. Olivia stared thoughtfully into her cup. I need time to process all of this. For 32 years, I've believed one story. I can't just accept a new one overnight. I understand, I'm not rushing you, but I want to know more. When we get back from our honeymoon, I'd like to meet again, to talk properly. Maybe see those letters and photos you mentioned. My heart swelled with hope. Of course, I'll be waiting. When do you return? In 2 weeks. We're flying to Bali. That sounds wonderful. I hope you have a fantastic trip. She smiled slightly for the first time that morning. Thank you. We finished our coffee in a more comfortable silence. Then, Olivia glanced at her watch. I have to go. Our flight is in 4 hours, and I still haven't finished packing. We stood up. I didn't know how to say goodbye. A handshake? A hug? Olivia made the decision for me. She stepped forward and gave me an awkward but sincere hug. It lasted only a moment, but it was enough. The ice was broken. I'll see you in 2 weeks, she said, pulling away. I'll be waiting, I replied. Have a safe trip. She nodded and walked toward the park exit. I watched her until she disappeared from view, only then realizing my own eyes were wet with tears. The next 2 weeks dragged on. I went about my usual routines, gardening, meeting with friends, reading, but my thoughts constantly returned to Olivia, to our conversation, to the fragile possibility of a new beginning. On the third day after the wedding, I received a call from Catherine. I was not expecting it. Arthur, her voice was cold and formal. I think we need to talk. I'm listening. What you did at the wedding was unforgivable. You ruined the most important day of Olivia's life with your lies. I didn't lie, Catherine. I told my version of the truth. Your version? Rage crackled in her voice. You twisted everything to make yourself the victim and me the villain. Was it fair to tell our daughter that I abandoned her? To hide my letters? To prevent us from seeing each other? I was protecting my daughter, she shouted, from a man who chose his career over his family. I worked to provide for our family, I replied calmly. And you know you started seeing James long before our divorce. That's what ruined our marriage, not my work. She was silent for a moment. Then her voice was quieter. That's all in the past, Arthur. What matters now is that you are interfering in Olivia's life, sowing doubt, and destroying her relationship with me. I don't want to destroy your relationship. I just want a chance to build one with my own daughter. After 32 years, through no fault of my own, I said firmly. Catherine sighed. Olivia said she wants to meet with you when she gets back. I can't stop her. She's a grown woman. But please, don't turn her against me. Don't ruin what we have. I was taken aback by the sudden shift in tone, the almost pleading note in the voice of this woman who had always been so unyielding. I won't turn her against you, Catherine, but I won't lie if she asks about the past. She'll never forgive me if she finds out everything, Catherine said quietly. She's your daughter. She loves you. It may be difficult, but I'm sure she will find it in her heart to forgive. After that call, I thought for a long time about Catherine's motives. Was she truly convinced she was protecting her daughter, or was it revenge? Or did she simply not want to share Olivia's love with anyone else? I couldn't answer those questions, and I decided that, in the end, it didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was the future. 2 weeks later, when Olivia was due back, I began to wait for her call. I gathered all the materials I had told her about, the letters, the photos, the documents. But days passed, and the phone remained silent. A week, 2, 3, I started to worry. Maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe Catherine had convinced her not to see me. I didn't want to pressure her, so I didn't call. But with each passing day, my hope dwindled. Then, almost a month after the wedding, my doorbell rang. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garden and wasn't expecting anyone. Wiping my hands on my jeans, I went to the door. On my doorstep stood Olivia, and she wasn't alone. James was with her. "Hello," she said. "Sorry to drop by unannounced. We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop in." I stood there for a moment, unable to hide my surprise and joy. "Olivia." "James." "Of course. Come in." I led them into the living room, apologizing for my disheveled appearance. When I returned from the kitchen with a tray of tea, Olivia was looking at the photos on the wall, her baby pictures, her school photos, the newspaper clippings. "You really did follow my life all these years," she said quietly. "The best I could," I replied, setting the tray down. We sat and I poured the tea, my hands shaking slightly. "How was the honeymoon?" I asked. "Wonderful," James answered. "Bali is an amazing place." "Yes, it was nice," Olivia added, though I could tell her mind was elsewhere. "I'm sorry I didn't call when we got back. I needed some time." "I understand. I've been thinking a lot about what you told me. I also spoke with my mom again. She admitted that things weren't exactly as she had told me. I was astonished. Catherine had admitted she was wrong. She doesn't agree with your version of everything," Olivia continued, "but she did admit that she might have been overprotective, that her resentment toward you probably influenced her decisions." I nodded, not wanting to comment. This was progress. "I found some of your letters," Olivia said suddenly, "in an old box in Mom's attic, unopened, and the receipts for the money you sent for my tuition." A lump formed in my throat. "Did you read the letters?" "Yes, all of them. I want to apologize for how I treated you at the wedding, for saying you were a stranger. I didn't know." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said softly. "You believed what you were told your whole life." Olivia set down her cup and looked me in the eye. "I'd like to get to know you better, if you'd like that too." Would I like that? I couldn't hold back a smile. "Olivia, that's all I've dreamed of for 32 years. James placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, and she smiled gratefully at him. I realized he was her partner in this decision, and I was grateful to him for it. "It won't be easy," Olivia warned. "It's been so many years. We're practically strangers. And Mom, she's having a hard time with this." "I understand. We can take small steps, at a pace that's comfortable for you." She nodded. "I'd like for you to come to our house for dinner next Friday, to see our home, our life." "I would love that," I replied, my heart overflowing. We talked for another hour. Olivia asked about my life, my work, my hobbies. I told her, trying not to overwhelm her with information. James mostly listened, occasionally adding a thoughtful comment. As they were leaving, Olivia paused at the door. "Can I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "You never remarried? After Mom?" I shook my head. "No. Why?" I hesitated, choosing my words. "I suppose because a part of me was always occupied with thoughts of you, of what I'd lost. There were other women, but I never felt ready to start a new family." Olivia nodded, as if my answer confirmed something she had already suspected. Thank you for being honest. We'll see you on Friday. They left, and I stood on the porch, watching them go. A fragile but real hope bloomed in my chest. A hope that after so many years of separation and misunderstanding, my daughter and I could finally find our way back to each other, that the truth spoken in that dramatic moment at her wedding was not the end, but the beginning. I returned to my garden. The rose bush, the one I had tended for so long in memory of a little girl, was covered in buds. Soon, they would open. Perhaps on her next visit, Olivia would see them in their full glory. And perhaps she would remember how much she had loved them as a child. I knelt before the bush, carefully trimming the dead branches, preparing it for a new season of life just like my own.